It's really hard because we hear that advice so much, right? And I think that's kind of what we were all kind of grown about with this idea that hard work equals success, right? So like you just push harder, you just post more and show up consistently and like post on this channel and write another email. Those are all tangible things that you can do that feel like you are ticking a box, right? Like you're doing something that is proactive, and that's where I think there's so much misconception.
Hey, soul sister, if you're posting every day, showing up consistently, and still not making sales, this episode is going to show you why. Today's conversation is for the woman who feels like she's doing everything, showing up, posting, staying consistent, but the sales just aren't matching the effort.
Because the truth is, it's not always about doing more. Sometimes it's what you're saying and how you're showing up in your message.
And that's exactly why we're so excited to have today's guest. Jordan Tram is a marketing strategist who helps female founders turn inconsistent sales into predictable growth.
After building brands at the highest level with Walmart, she now brings the same clarity and strategy to small business owners, helping them stand out and actually convert without burning out.
She's a mom navigating what success looks like in real time, which we know so many of you will resonate with.
Jordan, we're so excited to have you here. Let's dive in.
Thank you. I'm excited to chat with you guys today.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so Jordan, can you take us back? What led you from, corporate into the work you're doing now?
Yeah. So I kind of grew up with this idea that I was going into corporate, right? I grew up with the idea that you had a stay-at-home mom or a corporate mom. And so that was that I just went into corporate because that's what I was supposed to do. But I hit this point in my career where I looked around and I realized I had followed all of the check boxes of life. I had done everything I was supposed to do, right? I went and got the degree and I got the husband and the job and the house and I kind of like hit all those check boxes and I looked around and I said, this is it. This is what I'm supposed to do the rest of my life. And it was one of those eye-opening things where I was just like, this is a dream that I followed, but it wasn't necessarily my dream or how I wanted to be spending my life. So I kind of threw everything out the window and started from scratch. Yeah, it was a major life change to go from Walmart, which is like the biggest corporation in America, to me being sole solopreneur. So it was a huge shift just in mindset of figuring everything out on my own and kind of taking that plunge and walking away from what looked great on paper to doing my own thing. But yeah, it was really this eye-opening experience of understanding like what is the point of life? Like, what are we actually doing here? And is this actually how I want to be spending my life? Right. Which is something I had just never even considered asking myself before.
What are you seeing behind the scenes of big brands that most small business owners don't realize?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I see with my own clients and what I've taken from working in big corporations is really understanding where you win and your right to win, right? Like your unique perspective. And I think that's one of the things that gets so lost in like the trying to follow all the rules, right? Is people are overlooking what makes them so special because
Mhm.
they follow this marketing guru advice that they see online of hit the pain points and hit the transformation and the outcome that they want to hear, but they aren't looking at things through the lens of why their perspective is so unique and what is going to make them stand out. You know, when you work at Walmart, you know your competitors like the back of your hands, right? Like I worked in fashion. And so we knew exactly what the exact same dress would look like at Walmart and what like price point it was at and how many pockets it had and what the fabric material was made out of. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs get this imposter syndrome where they don't even want to look at the competition because they're afraid of what it will say about them. And in reality, I help my clients look at the competition so they can find out what their unique thing to bring to the table is, right? So it's, I'm working with a photographer and she has an IT background. So, like, naturally, the way that she's going to plan a photo shoot is different than a creative photographer that has like creative background and isn't thinking through all of the logistics and little steps. So it's finding out what that unique perspective is and really leaning into it to bring your uniqueness to life in a different way that no one else can.
That's really powerful. The first thing that comes to mind when you say that
Yeah.
is your personal brand. I know Sherry and I will
Yes.
talk about that a lot, and building a personal brand. And when you have your own personal brand, it's like you really are coming to the table and being visible with your own distinct messaging, your own way of how you show up, your own perspective on things, and just how you overall show up in the marketplace.
100%.
When we think about, you know, what is your unique perspective, and that being a biggest like difference between the bigger brands versus the smaller businesses, we see a lot of women where, we're told just show up on social media, you be consistent, post daily. Like we just hear that constantly, and if you do that, you will be successful, you will win. But oftentimes we'll see a lot of women who are posting, they're showing up daily, they're being consistent, and yet they still can't seem to make the sales that they want to get to the income level that they want to be at. So my question to you would be, what's like the biggest misconception entrepreneurs have about consistency and sales?
Yeah, it's really hard because we hear that advice so much, right? And I think that's kind of what we were all kind of grown about with this idea that hard work equals success, right? So like you just push harder, you just post more and show up consistently and like post on this channel and write another email and like those are all tangible things that you can do that feel like you are ticking a box, right? Like you're doing something that is proactive, and that's where I think there's so much misconception because what you're actually doing is you're doing things that check a box, but you're not doing the underlying work of understanding your foundation and the groundwork that really goes into why your messaging resonates. And so it's a lot easier to just post another thing and cross your fingers that this one's going to go viral or this one's going to resonate, but what you're actually doing is ignoring the real work that you need to do beforehand, which is understanding, who your customer is and how you meet them where they're at with your unique perspective.
This is so relevant to us as entrepreneurs online, and I've been in the industry forever. And I know first I started a cake business and it was all on Facebook, right? And it was all
Yeah.
posting, but people would see you right away. It wouldn't be
Hmm.
something that you would have to wait for the algorithm to catch up with you. And now what we're seeing is we're playing the chase game. We're chasing the algorithm, right? We're not just showing up in front of everybody. So what you're saying, I feel, is like the quality over quantity is what really matters, but speaking to the ideal client. So what are some ways of somebody showing up with that quality? What are few steps that they can take today to start creating quality content over quantity?
Yes, you're right. And it's so interesting that you say that because it used to be that algorithm would just feed things in order, right? So
Mhm.
literally, the more you posted, the more you got seen. And now that we're in this world of AI where people can crank out content, we're kind of going back to that mentality of people like just pump out the content and the more you get out is the better, right? So it is really interesting that we're kind of making this cyclical learning of more is not always better. But I use what I call the French fry method of meeting your customer where they're at with what they want, right? So I've got a 5-year old and he is the pickiest eater. And if he can choose any day, he wants a French fry, right? And so my job as a mom is not to feed him a French fry every day, but I know that he needs a vegetable, right? So I'm slowly working on getting him what he wants with the French fry. And then we're tiptoeing into the sweet potato fry. And eventually we'll get to the broccoli of what he wants, right? Or what he needs and that nutrition. And so I kind of teach the same thing as the marketing coach in helping people meet their customer where they're at with the French fry, right? Give them what they want to get them into your world. And then you're slowly going to get them to that vegetable. But if you start talking to them about the vegetables, they're crossing or they're not going to listen at all, right? And that's kind of what goes into the algorithm black void of no one's seeing this because no one wants to talk about it, right? And even marketing strategy is boring. So, like, if I wanna talk to anyone about strategy, like, I can't just use my marketing jargon and tell them what they actually need to hear. You have to meet them where they're at with the french fry of what they want to help them actually, like, open their ears and listen to what you're trying to say.
I love this so much. I actually it makes me think back to my sales coach, who I hired back years ago. And what she taught me, she said, "Tell them what they want, but give them what they need." And it goes back
Yes,
to the marketing. And based on, what you were saying to share about, showing up, marketing and on the different social media platforms. But I think what I'm really hearing is you need to be able to speak to your customers' pain points. You need to be able to speak to their desires. You need to basically take what it is that you have and filter it into language that really, really resonates with them, right? And I think that's
exactly.
like the perfect segue into talking about visibility versus conversion and how a lot of times, as women on social media, a lot of times we're always like, we live in this world, we're focused on the views, we're focused on the likes and the engagement, yada, yada. But that doesn't always
Mhm.
translate into sales. It doesn't always convert somebody who engages with your social media posts into actual customers, right? So, what
Exactly.
actually moves someone from a follower to a buyer?
Yeah. Well, I think the huge thing right now, especially in our AI world and the era of authenticity, is leaning into building trust with the customer, right? And one of the ways that you do that, a lot of people are saying, it just takes longer for someone to convert. And that's true, right? We can have people in our world longer and have them on our email list or seeing our feed, and you can kind of nurture them through this relationship. But I think one of the biggest ways that you can do that is building trust faster, right? And so if you think
Mm,
about it like a friendship, like I have people in my life that they're more surface level friendships, right? Like you kind of just like talk about the niceties and like you don't really get into the deeper rooted challenges of life, right? And then I have friends that I just walked into their life and we're talking about like the crux of motherhood and like the really ins and outs of like the hard times. And the level kind of trust changes between that surface relationship and really getting into the heart of like why we're even here and what we're doing with our lives. And I think if you think about that in terms of building a relationship with your audience, getting to that trust and letting them see you in that light that's maybe not always shiny and beautiful is a way that you can build trust faster so you can convert faster, right? Because people want to
mm,
know that you are a real human, that you have feelings, and that, yeah, not every day is rainbows and butterflies. And so building that trust faster and actually showing up as a human being who has highs and lows is going to create that trust factor faster so that they will convert more, right? Because there's probably 100 other people in your industry selling what you are, and your ideal audience is seeing their posts too. And if you guys are all showing up with the same proof points, the same ways that you're speaking to their pain points and what transformation they want, there's nothing that's going to differentiate you. But when you say something that resonates with them on a human level, on a personal level, that's when they start building the idea that you are more than just one aspect of your life, right? We are multifaceted people. We have other things in our life other than what we're working on in the immediate factor. And bringing that to the table builds that trust factor so people can feel like they trust you in whatever era of their life they are
I think AI has a lot to do with how we're showing up to online now. And I feel like
in. Yes.
a lot of people are trying to show up authentically, but this whole AI thing is starting to feel like it's almost like a rat race. Like we're trying to fit into the future of what social media looks like.
Yes.
And I think also like social media is so saturated, right? And so it's hard sometimes to stand out as an
For sure.
individual. So it's really about, I think what you're saying is like you have to be your own unique voice, your own unique messaging, you build that trust through your uniqueness. And they're more likely to
Mhm.
buy you than they are to buy your service or your product, right?
Exactly.
So over time that, those the messaging that you give, people get to know you over time. But is there like a scientific, like a psychology when it comes to showing up online where you go from that trust building to the sales? Like, how do you, convert to sales without being salesy as an entrepreneur?
Yes. But the way that I think about converting that trust building into sales is building that relationship on a deeper level, but also thinking about their perspective and what they need. So it's building the trust in more than just what they need in the immediacy, but understanding where they're going to, right? And I think that's one of the things that we can do as brands is anticipate our customers' needs, right? So I know what you're going through right now and I'm going to know your next steps. And so even thinking like beyond the first sale, but thinking about those repeat purchases as you have a client, thinking through what the next step is that they're going to need in their journey and understanding like psychologically where they're at. So you can meet them where they're at and you can anticipate their needs before they even realize it, right? So you are coming to them with solutions that they didn't even know that they needed. And so I think it's kind of understanding that customer journey of where your clients at, wherever, if it's their first time that they are coming to you or if it's a repeat customer, but really thinking through what those different touch points are that they are going through as a business or as a personal brand so that you can anticipate their needs and be that solution. You're already in their pocket and already showing up with
Mm.
the solutions that they are looking for.
That's such fire advice. I love this. And also, I just wanted to share this really quick because as you were talking about the two different references of like surface level kind of like connections versus like BFF connection. And it made me
Yeah.
think of me and Sherry actually. It made me think of like when we first met, we were so like standoffish with each other, like didn't want to like let down our walls, very surface level type of friendship. And then it wasn't
Hmm.
until we both got pregnant around the same times. Our boys are 9 days apart. So we were
Oh my
pregnant around the
gosh.
same time, working under the same roof at that time as well. So we saw each other every day. And that pregnancy, I mean, you're a mom, Jordan, and any one of our soul sisters who are listening who are a mom, you know what it's like going through the pregnancy, all of the hurdles, the challenges, everything, right? And her and I, we would talk about all of the things that we were feeling, like going through, like the mood fluctuations, like constantly eating in the first trimester, like feeling so like full in the third trimester, like all of the things. And because we had something where we could talk about that we resonated so deeply, we understood each other. We understood each other's language. And that
Yes.
developed trust. And that trust allowed us to really let down those walls and move from like that surface level to the BFF. And I'll never forget it. It was like we are doing our first annual like family trip. This was like the first time that I was invited. And her and I were sitting in the parks drinking wine. It was in the nighttime, just confessing our undying love of our BFF friendship at that point. But it just made me think about the two different, surface level to the BFF level. Like
Yeah.
you have to understand each other. You have to be able to speak to that person and then you build that trust factor over time,
Yeah.
right? So I really
Yeah.
love that you shared that distinction. But for the women, like for our listeners who are, showing up and they're posting the content, I would really, really love for you, Jordan, to basically talk to the messaging gap. So say for example, like maybe they're not like they're getting people to engage, but they're not necessarily buying. So basically, what I'm asking
Mhm.
is, are you able to help our listeners identify some of the signs that their messaging isn't clear enough where it's actually resonating with their ideal clients? So that could be like, people that are engaging, but they're not buying, or they're attracting the wrong audience, or, so on and so forth. But are you able to kind of like share some of the signs that their messaging is unclear?
Yeah, and I think right now it's really interesting because of the nature of the economy and everyone's, there's this trust gap too. And so people are being slower to buy. And so there's a lot of this wariness for people to jump in anyway, right? So when sales are slow, but you're still getting that engagement, it can feel really frustrating, right? And you're like, and that's the same thing of like showing up constantly, but you're still not converting that to sales. It feels like, what am I missing? What is
Yeah.
going on? that that everyone else has got figured out, right? Because it always feels like you're the only one
Mhm.
and like no one else is going through this pain point. But I think one of the biggest things is thinking about your customer and what is actually keeping them up at night, right? Because there are a lot of things in life that are nice to haves, but they are not hitting me in the face, right? And so thinking about why your customer is staying awake at 11 p.m. at night and what she is thinking about and speaking to her in those words is such a powerful opportunity. And I found it even with my own marketing of
How do you do
I'm
that
giving them.
exactly? Like, how do you get inside of your customer's mind? Like, how do you know what they're thinking? How do you pull that stuff out?
Yeah. And it's interesting because we are likely showing up to our business as experts, right? And so the things that we are thinking about, the things that we are identifying that our customer is going through are likely way more deep rooted than what our customer is actually thinking, right? You go to the doctor and you say, my arm hurts. You don't say, I have a broken arm or you know what I mean? You show up and you talk about the symptoms, you don't talk about what's actually going on internally. And so you have to think about that in the same way of what your customer is going through. What are they actually worried about right now? And a lot of things that you can do to help identify that are talking to your customers, figuring out why they found you in the first place, what they were going through, but also listening. So I found this tool using AI, of course. It's called Grok. I don't know if you've heard of it, but you can essentially like cull the internet and find out what people are talking about on threads on Reddit. And so that's one way of doing social listening using AI, which I think is a really interesting, fascinating point. So you kind of have the qualitative standpoint of talking to your customers and understanding what the actual pain points are. But then from a qualitative standpoint, you can cull the internet. So you use this AI tool where it goes in and it finds in Reddit where people are talking about these pain points, right? So I can go
Oh.
in and say, look on Reddit for marketing struggles that entrepreneurs are going through. And it'll cull Reddit and threads and Facebook groups, and it'll pull out all of the pain points that people are talking about. And so it's a really interesting, I think, use case of how AI can be a tool for good, right? So it's not necessarily you using it for copy to sound like everyone else, but it's really about understanding where your customer's at and what language that they're already using, right? Because you hear that a lot, right? Speak how your customer is speaking. And it's hard because you're not your customer. And so getting into their head is often, a hard thing because there's a gap between your knowledge and what their knowledge is. But thinking about what is top of mind for them and what are those pain points that are actually getting in the way. Because at the end of the day, there's not a whole lot, right? Like I think people say it's like and relate or health, wealth, and love are like the big three things that people have gaps on, right? And so figuring out ultimately what are those things that you are addressing and how can you meet them where they're at within those three buckets.
Okay, so there's a lot of women that are afraid to show up online, the visibility factor.
Mhm.
We talk about being seen and being like putting out your message out there. Social media can be really hard on people. It can create
Yes.
burnout, it can create overthinking, it can create imposter syndrome, comparison, and that keeps people up at night too, right? So I think I'm asking for the woman who doesn't necessarily want to show up on social media every day.
Mhm.
What are
Mhm.
some other
Mhm.
ways that she can build her business from that authenticity without having to sell her soul on the internet, online
Yeah.
every day, and try to come up with all these captions and content and graphics and pieces of work that she needs to like put out there? Because social media, we know, isn't the only place that we can do this. So, what are some ways that women can start building without the overwhelm of social media?
I hear that. And it opens so many doors of feeling that imposter syndrome and checking those statistics all the time, right? And feeling like it is tied to your worthiness and deeper rooted
Mhm.
feelings of that. I mean, there's so many ways that you can market without social media, whether that's going to networking groups or, if your business is a local business showing up like on a Google search or some way like that. But I also think that the thing about marketing that I've helped people unlock is figuring out how to approach it in a way that feels authentic to them, right?
Mm.
And I think part of that is saying the quiet part out loud, right? I was working with a client and she came to me and she was like, "Jordan, I'm posting on LinkedIn, I'm posting on Facebook, I'm posting on Instagram, and I hate it. Like I
Mm.
actually hate it." And what she was doing was building a woman's community. And what we talked about was saying the part out loud, right? Like saying, "I hate social media." And the whole point of her brand
Yeah.
became, "I'm meeting you on social media so that we can build real relationships through this community." And so it was almost using what you don't like about social media in a way that can help you, right? In a way that is saying exactly what you're thinking out loud, because like we talked about, that is a trust factor. Everyone is going through this. No one like really, I mean, well, sure, there's influencers and whoever wants to actually show up, but like a lot of people have that same pain point. And so just calling it out, just saying, speaking your truth is such a powerful way to retake back feeling like marketing is selling your soul, right? Like showing up in a way that feels authentic and like you are not pretending. So I think that is also just a tool to re-empower yourself in marketing and think about it more as a way to share your story and your narrative, whatever that is, in a way that feels true to you and you're not performing.
I think that's powerful. It's showing up as your authentic self and understanding that your authenticity is your signature personal brand, really. And that allows you to stand out. But also, what I'm taking from this is you have to combine that authenticity and how you show up, but also pair that with the language that connects with your customer. And
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that AI tool. I think that's powerful. Any way we can use AI to better ourselves, not
Right.
completely like replace our creativity, but to assist us. Like, I think that's amazing. So for our listeners, once again, go check out Grok. That will help you to really like pull out some of your customers' pain points if you really want to start to work on speaking their language. But going back to like that authenticity part, one thing I wanted to point out, and this is something that Sherry and I have talked a lot about. Both of us run multiple businesses, and we've also have grown and evolved over the years. And so a lot of the times we've let go of past businesses because they were just no longer aligned with where we were going. And so I wanted to speak to the women who are listening in and maybe in this transitional period right now within their business. Maybe they're evolving, their business is evolving. When your business has evolved, but your messaging hasn't, what can they start to do to align that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that, that's super powerful. And even me coming from corporate to my entrepreneurial journey, that's an evolution, right? Of how I'm showing up and who I am as a person, right? And like
Yeah.
having this eye opening experience of like, why am I even here is a huge opportunity just to continue to evolve what you're talking about. But I think one of the things that I use as a tool is coming up with what your vision is. What is your ultimate, and my brand is called Purple Sky. So I call it, what is your purple sky vision, right? It's beyond blue sky thinking. It's what are the limitless possibilities of what you could be. And so having that vision of how you show up as a brand, as a person, what you actually want to do with your life becomes the North Star in your business of how you want to show up. And I think of that as like this big picture thinking that everything is kind of a trickle down from, right? So you have this vision of where you want to go. Everything that you're building should ladder up to that goal. And that also helps you prevent showing up where you don't need to, right? Because we all get kind of stuck in this marketing wheel of starting a YouTube channel because it's hot, or going down different avenues of showing up on different channels. But having that North Star vision really helps you align your business. But I think as you are evolving, one of the biggest things is bringing your clients along, your audience along with you for the journey, and just saying it out loud again, right? Like just telling them through what this evolution means, because there are times that we close a chapter of our life and maybe it's not always met with the best response. But I think being able to tell your customers why this change is happening, what you're doing next, kind of where you're at in this journey. One thing that's really true about all humans is people are nosy, right? They want to know the behind the scenes. So, as much as you are able to tell them to bring them along the journey with you, even if you are, in that messy middle of building it, I think the better the reception that you're going to get, right? We don't expect you to have it all figured out. But if you can kind of share little bits of what that evolution looks like, I think that also helps you resonate with your customers more and be able to show them what this journey looks like, that they're on board with you, right? They're going with you through the evolution and the recreation of yourself. But having that kind of North Star is usually what I use as a guide to help you make sure that the decisions that you're making as you evolve are continuing to get you closer to what that ultimate goal of how you want to live your life looks like.
So good. Okay. There's so much. That sounded really bad, but it's so good. Um, I'm thinking about all the women who are overwhelmed with the content
Yeah.
strategy part. Okay. Because
Mm-hmm.
many of us are trying to build a business and they say, hey, niche down, speak
Mm.
on one topic. But how many different
Yeah.
ways am I going to speak on the same thing? Like it is like a circle, but also how far can I go where I start losing people? Do you know what I mean? So like
Sure.
pulling myself back in with my messaging and my core offer. Is that the direction that a woman now starting out should go? Like if she's just starting out a business and she knows her ideal client, she knows what she's teaching now, but she has this one core offer that she's putting out. How does she start to build out her content around that one offer so she doesn't feel overwhelmed by creating content?
Mm.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's interesting how many people have that same pain point of feeling like there's they're on this hamster wheel, right? Of this never ending like need for more content, more newness, more feeding the algorithm. And it can feel overwhelming. But I think one of the things that we overlook is how many times people need to hear something the same way. And you think that you've told this story before and your audience doesn't want to hear it again, but they do. So repurposing content is a huge opportunity that I think we all overthink so much. Like we think that we're telling the same thing way too often, but we're not, right? And so that's one of the ways to compete against the need to feel like you're constantly needing new content is retelling the same story. But the other thing that I do all the time is after any interaction, whether it's a coffee chat or a call with my client or, just what I'm going through my day to day is write down like the connection of stories that you can help build and bring it into real life, right? So if you are talking about a pain point, how can you bring that to life through this client experience? And what can you learn about each interaction that you have that kind of builds this cohesive story? So you could be talking about the same offer every single day, but you're telling it through the lens of this other client or through the lens of what you just saw in this coffee chat experience. Or even like I took a
Mm.
picture of my garden the other day and was talking about how it's a metaphor to life and like letting go of perfectionism. And so it's like it's just I think the more that you are in your own world and thinking about how it connects to your offer, you're going to start seeing those dots connect and you're
Mm.
going to be able to start telling those stories in new ways that you are essentially telling the same story over and over again. It's not that like rocket science of pain point transformation, right? But the way that you can tell stories differently is really what resonates to people, right? And that's like, I mean, that's why we tell stories to children, right? Like, that's why fables are a thing because people resonate with stories. They are not going to remember the facts that you give them, but if you tell them through a story, they can understand it and they can see the lesson coming out of it. So you're essentially just telling stories and bringing your points to life through storytelling and in all the different aspects of life.
How much
It's,
of our content should be storytelling?
yeah.
I mean, as much as you can, right? Like, I mean, everyone's like, not everyone, but everyone says that education content is dead, right? And so it's really just a lens of how you put a spin on it because the more storytelling you can do, that is how you capture audiences, right? People want to hear stories. I mean, that is like the history of our culture, right? Like that's how we know, I don't know, as far back as you can think, right? Everything is written through a story. And so the more I think that you can story tell, the better, because it just captures people in a way that the facts aren't going to get across.
And we have low attention spans. So I
Yes.
feel like
Yep.
I go on TikTok and I'm scrolling through and I see somebody, and immediately if I'm drawn to them, I stay. So
Mhm.
sometimes it's like the way they deliver it too, like the first few
Yes.
seconds. So is there like a framework that you do for yours, or is it just showing up as you are and hoping for the best? I'm
Mhm.
asking
I
for those
know.
people who say storytelling is my thing, but I don't know the social media strategies on how to grab somebody's attention, right?
Yes, I know. And I like, to be honest, I'm a bad storyteller. Like I've always been bad at telling stories. And so to like have all this like stuff be talking about storytelling is really hard for me because I'm like, I just jump from idea to idea and I don't connect the pieces like I should. But I think if you're thinking about what is going to capture people's attention because people are also selfish and they're thinking about themselves. And so thinking about it through their lens of why do they care, right? And so you're kind of telling this story, but the way that you paint the picture, they kind of need to see it for themselves.
Mm.
Especially when you're trying to do storytelling and selling, how they perceive the story, they also need to be able to reflect it in their own lives. And
Mm.
so coming at a story from the perspective of what is in it for the client, what are they going to see themselves in, is also a really good angle to put on about why people care and why people engage.
Love that so much. I'm really curious on your take, Jordan, between
Yeah.
being niched versus being general.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's the like being like specifically niched versus just like, oh, I serve women. Is that a good enough niche or could you niche down even more?
Yeah. I have a really hard time with niche because I do serve so many multi passionate women. And I myself hate to be put in a box, right? Like that was like just something I've always like I never wanted to write down my 5-year plan because I didn't want anyone to say, "Nope, you said this, so now you're on this path,"
Mm,
right? And so the way that I approach it, I call it the golden thread, which is really your perspective of life and what runs through your business, right? So no matter how many multi-passionate businesses you have or who you serve, you're going to do it in a unique way. And so you can look at niching down by serving a really specific group of people, or you can look at it in how you serve them a different way and what that lens is that you're going to do differently. So I call it the golden thread because it weaves through everything that you do, right? So it weaves through your
mhm.
messaging, your offer stack, it weaves through, what how you're showing up and presenting yourself through the world. So it's just kind of a different way of thinking about you don't always have to niche down into a certain customer category, but the niche could be just the way that you approach things differently or just a specific offer perspective that you are doing something differently. So I do think that there is value in understanding like I'm not going to serve everyone everything, right? Like we're not the Cheesecake Factory, but you're going to have some specific thing that you are known for so that people come to you for a reason.
Yeah, I feel like our niche is very it's still broad because it's women.
Yeah.
We're all, like,
Yeah.
going through the same stuff, right? But we've had to really talk about which woman are we talking to, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
so I think we've nailed it down, and the way who we let on the podcast for our guests, what we talk about in our posts, the
Yeah.
topics and stuff like that, and I think it's talking to not not a broad, but, like, and also not very niched. So it can be kind of like in the middle here, right? So she might be going through perimenopause, and that could be one issue she's having, but it affects everything that we're all doing. So building a business, those things
Mhm.
affect how you build a business. So I think for me too, as a wedding photographer, I was always told niche, niche, niche. And at the
Mhm.
beginning, I don't think that's the right move because I had to figure out what my niche was. So I basically did everything until I figured out what I was good at and what I loved. and what
Mhm.
resonated with me. And then I could speak to those clients, you know? I think niching down really helped me to not burn myself out
Mhm.
because I was so
True.
specific on what I was doing that I wasn't serving everybody and I wasn't doing everything.
Mhm.
So that's such a big thing. But I wanted to ask a controversial question. What are your thoughts on sharing your personal life? Is there a line between sharing your personal life and your business behind the scenes?
Yeah. So it's interesting because when I first started my business, I had someone who was helping me with social media, and she said the rule was a 20-80%, that you should be only sharing your life 20%. But I hated that rule. And I think that the way that people engage, like the majority of comments that I will get on Instagram are like normal life things. They're not on the things about my business. So the way that you kind of build that relationship is through the personal stuff.
Mhm.
Now it's different, I think, when you are growing, right? And you are not just the brand anymore. When you are a piece of the brand, right? As your business scales and you are separating the personal brand from the bigger brand of what that is, that changes, right? And so it's not necessarily about you, but it's about the behind the scenes too. And so you think about building the business and the brand, and just a different narrative, but it's also still that personal aspect of it, right? Because I think even in big brands, people want to know what the behind the scenes is, right? And so thinking about like a fashion brand at Walmart, it was a $2 billion brand. And so there is no personal brand behind
Right.
it, right? But there was a need to show the behind the scenes of how we got there, right? Of how we were spotting trends and finding new styles and what went into the work behind the scenes that people really crave, right? People want to know what is going on. So I think it's interesting about how much personal you're showing versus if you just think about it behind the scenes, right? So it doesn't have to be like you as an individual of what's going on, but as a wedding photographer, what are those behind the scenes things that you're thinking about that aren't necessarily like the perfectly curated pictures, but it's like the planning that goes into it, or like the pictures
Mhm.
behind the pictures, right? It's like the wedding photographer that ran into a bush or whatever. But like it's thinking about all those things that you don't see as this perfectly curated version, but the underlying work that's behind it that makes you, even as a brand, human.
You're humanizing the brand, whether it's a
Yes.
big
Yeah,
corporate brand or it's a small brand. At the end of the day,
exactly.
when you humanize the brand itself, you connect deeply with people. And when you connect with them, you build that trust factor, which then eventually
Yeah.
Mhm.
translates into you being the person that they invest in, they buy. I love this. Jordan, are there is there anything else that we may have missed that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and this is just my takeaway of life, because I've been on my evolution, my journey, is really thinking about how you want to spend your Tuesday, is what I say, right? I think one of the things that we often do, especially women, mom, is we defer joy to a someday. And I went through this journey of watching my mom get diagnosed with terminal cancer and her life turned upside down, right? And she had planned for this someday vision of this retirement that was wonderful. And I think that so often we are pushing those big memories, those big moments that we are waiting for, feeling ready till the weekend or till vacation. But one thing that I just would love to leave everyone with is thinking about how they want to spend a random Tuesday and how can you infuse more joy into the everyday so that you're not waiting for a someday to embrace that joy. And so how I do that is just little moments, right? I try to take one thing one week and do something fun with my kids so that we are making memories in the everyday. And that could just mean like going to the park when you normally would say no, or saying yes to popsicles before bedtime. And just one more thing that you can add joy to your life so that you're not deferring and waiting for this perfect moment in time. Because I think we all know that the cards may never align. And if you're waiting for perfect timing, you're never going to get that perfect time. So the more that you can figure out how to just make every day a little bit more joyful is how I really try to approach life now.
Thank you for spending your Tuesday with us.
Yeah. It's a great start to a
That worked
Tuesday.
out timing perfectly, didn't it?
That was such a good end off to the episode because I feel like we get caught up in like building the business and showing up, and we forget that we need to show up for ourselves and for our families
Yeah.
and life
Yeah.
because life's going to go by so fast before you know it. All you've been doing is burying your head in work.
Mm,
And that's not the
Absolutely.
way that we should be living. And do things intentionally, do things with purpose, speak to your ideal clients, don't be afraid. And I think intention is everything when it comes to building your brand, being somebody who is built from a place of visibility and trying to show up as authentically as I can. But there is a point where you can start to lose yourself in that when you start to get sucked into the narrative, like, this is my whole identity. So it's
Yes.
important, like you said, to do those things for yourself. And, what are
Mhm.
you going to do on a Tuesday? Like,
mm.
it's important to separate at the same time, I think. So thank you
Absolutely.
for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 It's so powerful. The thing is like when you're living in the present versus in the past or in the future, like you said, like someday or my vision is just like really staying present, staying grounded in the now. And there's so
Mhm.
much joy and there's so much transformation that you get to experience when you really can just like slow down and you can be
Mm.
present in the now. And sometimes that's great. Like
Yeah.
it's not always easy, right? Like sometimes we have so many responsibilities as women, as moms, as parents, as business owners. So we're juggling a lot. And sometimes, we find ourselves a little dysregulated or a little like just constant rush go mode, right? But it's just take
Right.
that time every single day in the morning when you wake up, sipping on your coffee or your tea, whatever it is, but just taking those moments to just ground yourself and be present in the moment. And like Jordan said, have a great Tuesday. Like do the fun thing, do the thing you wouldn't normally do and just really enjoy life in the now. And I think that really
Yeah.
translates into your energy and how you show up. And I truly believe this when your energy is like when you have when your energy is full and you're grounded and you're present and you're joyful, you're magnetic. And so when you show up online naturally, that magnetism is going to attract the people that you want to attract and connect with. So it's really
100%.
like not just the external stuff, but it's also making sure that you're taking care of yourself internally so that it feeds into the external.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. Yeah, the more that you
Th-
can show up as yourself, you're right. It changes everything. It changes who you are and the people around you, and I feel like if you are trying to perform, people can feel it and you can feel it, right? And
Mm,
so the more
yeah.
that you can feel like yourself, it just makes life easier.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
This was so good, this conversation. I think that we both
Yes.
took away a lot from it, and I know our audience will. So if you're listening in to this episode, let us know like what you thought, where you're stuck, and how you're moving your business and your life, and how you're spending your Tuesdays. So
Yeah.
leave us a comment, follow us, and also we will link Jordan's Instagram page to the show notes so you can go see what she's up to and what she's offering because she has a lot of stuff that she's doing. So we're really excited. And thank you again, Jordan, for coming on.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thank you,
guys. This is
Jordan.
great.